All right. Good. We're
Morning.
finally on. Good morning. Good morning. It's only 12 minutes after 10. Uh, we generally tell people we're going to be on at 10, but everyone is late these days. It's one of those things that have become acceptable.
It's true. It's true. It's okay. It's like, oh, well, I'm here though. I'm here.
Yes, listen, we both had to put on our makeup and get our coffee and things
Speak for
like
yourself. I got coffee.
yeah. I just got my coffee, so
My
I'm good.
glasses are covering my not applied face. So
Listen, we're going to BS for a couple of minutes because I want to give people a chance to get on. But the topic you chose today is so timely. It's so perfect. Like, let me just first acknowledge you because this is the ideal topic given what we're experiencing today. Good morning,
absolutely.
everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope you contribute. I hope you get something out of what we're going to be discussing today. It's exhaustion. But before we do that,
It's a real yawn.
does that happen every time I say exhaustion? Am I hypnotizing you? You're
That was a real one
exhausted.
too. Like my eyes are tearing. Perfect timing.
Don't yawn. Yeah, people catch it. It's a problem.
It's
Now
true.
everyone who's looking right now is yawning.
It's true.
Okay, before we do that though, just tell me that today is Columbus Day, or what is formerly known as Columbus Day,
To
right?
some
It
people.
used to be a day where we would celebrate Columbus, the founding of America, and Italians. Now we've added on to that. We're also celebrating indigenous people. So
Correct.
we are abundant enough that we could celebrate a few things at one time. Uh,
Multitasking again in everything we do.
what'd you say?
It's like multitasking. Everything we do. We seem to we're just topping it off. Top off again.
Yes. So you are home now. You have the kids home, or they have a half a day?
No, so my kids are actually off today. They were not off last year,
Completely off.
completely off. So
Okay.
we were actually surprised when we started this because last year they took it away. They did not have when they didn't have a half day last year either. They had school. So this year they're both home.
Do you find it more tiring? So let's introduce our topic. Again, our topic is exhaustion. There are so many reasons for exhaustion. Do you find it more tiring than when they're home or when they're not home?
Uh honestly, for me, it's like not home. When they're home, I just feel like I they do so much in such a short period of time at school. I want to make sure that they're occupied enough. They're used to the constant go, 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 go. There's always something to be done. They're on to
But
the
for
next thing.
you as a mom, given this topic that we're discussing, exhaustion, is it more exhausting when they're around or when they're not around?
I would
I'm putting you on
say
the
not
spot.
around. I know, right? You're making me think of it. I would say not. Well, no, you know what? I would say, I'll stick with not around.
Okay, yeah, I think you're just doing that because you know that there's a chance they're going to see this, or that I will send it to them. I will
No, you know
blackmail
what
you.
my theory was? You
Yeah.
probably would. My theory, I was thinking about it in terms of like the go, go, go. But when they're not around, if I'm down doing something, there's a little bit more downtime. So I don't have time to think about being tired. Whereas if they're there present, I'm kind of just like going with the motions and we're doing something. I'm
Uh-huh.
tired once I stop.
Okay. Are your kids getting in the way of you doing things?
No, no, they're very
Okay.
local. They're good. Yeah, they're
You have to
not.
throw them that much under the bus.
Nah, they're good. I'm very knock on wood. I'm very lucky. I'm sorry, and that's a real statement, people. I'm not. I'm not saying that they're very helpful.
Well, let's get into this topic because it's one I know everyone can relate to. I believe, I will not swear on a stack of Bibles about this, but I believe that the number one cause of doctor visits is exhaustion.
So
More people go to doctors, call doctors because of exhaustion than any other reason. And the problem with that is that exhaustion can come from so many places. It's one of the most generalized symptoms that there are. It's hard for doctors to know the reasons why. It's hard for people to figure out the reasons why because it could come from so many places.
oh yeah,
So before we discuss some of the things that it could be, and this is super important, this conversation in itself could change things for people, right? It could be a start, an opening. But before we do that, tell me this: is this something that you find that you suffer from or with?
At times, absolutely. I mean, I definitely feel I'm still on program. So right now I'm feeling very good. I mean, I'm not feeling that sense, but there came a point where over the summer where you should feel the most energetic, right? You're outside, you're active, you have plans constantly, and you're just embracing the nice weather, and you're surrounded by a ton of people. There were times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt like a truck hit me. Like
Mm.
I would just feel a sense of outright exhaustion, not just tired. I would feel like when I would hit the bed, I would crash. Like I was just so tired.
Let me ask this: when you get together with other moms or other peers,
Mhm.
is this a common topic of
Oh
conversation?
yeah.
You're all
Honestly,
bitching about the size of your behinds and about that you're exhausted.
no, you want to laugh. I feel like, especially with my close circle, and I've never realized it before, but in conversation, one of the first things we always say when we see each other, when it's like, "Oh, what's going on?" Oh, I'm so tired. It's like the first thing we don't even. I don't even think if it's is it out of routine? Is it because we really are just constantly on that hamster wheel? Like I don't get it, but every it's almost I don't think I've had a conversation in the past like easily 6 months where it didn't involve being tired at some point.
I hear
We'll
it
start
all
with
the
it.
time. I hear it all the time in the office. I hear it with conversations with friends. I mean, listen, men are not, going to do that to the same degree as women, but we still, will mention it,
Absolutely.
right? It's not like I don't call my buddy and like, I'm like, Adam, how you doing? Ugh, I'm so exhausted.
I
Right?
like how
It's
you
just right.
that.
The has to be there. So that's not how it takes place, but I think there's an understanding among a lot of people that they just are. And am I wrong, or is this problem getting worse? Has it gotten worse over the last few years? We've had a different reason and
Yep.
reasons.
Yes, I think that so when you look back to see the past 5 years, right? When we went from busy, crazy, forced to slow down in a
Yeah,
sense, right? And now we are confined to four walls for the most part, or however everyone chose to quarantine. And your routine became different. Like it was, okay, this is okay for a couple of days, a week, 2 weeks. All right, now we're a month in. How many times we're going to bed early, watching movies in bed, and everyone's cuddling up together. Let's do like a popcorn night, and everyone's hanging out. And now it's like, okay, well, now let's get back to reality. After a month, we're now back into some sort of a little bit more of an intense routine. Again, no break. Everything's done within the same four walls. And we're going, and we're starting to still feel tired. But yet we're not traveling, we're not commuting, we're not going anywhere. It's standard basic to a store and back. I mean, maybe some walks around the block. We were all active and everything. And then I'm like, well, what is it that I'm feeling tired? Honestly, I feel like towards the end, and when I say the end of COVID, I don't mean the end of COVID. I mean the end of the quarantine phases when things start to
yeah.
come out. I think it was a burnout.
That's really when it started.
Yeah.
And something just occurred to me. I'm interested whether prisoners tend to be really exhausted. They're confined all the time. Maybe this is why they like to go out into the yard and beat each other senseless. Maybe just because they're
With weight
tired, they figure
loss.
they need some exercise, right? And
Mhm.
they have to wake themselves up. But that kind of confinement, yes, that kind of confinement, like it was a concern. We had conversations, I remember with Jennifer, and we had these conversations online on
Yeah.
Facebook. What's going to happen after the pandemic? Is it going to be the kind of thing where everybody is going to bust out and celebrate and party and procreate and catch up?
Everything's going great. Everything's wild.
Yeah, or well, because that would be normal and expected.
Yes.
Or was the conditioning from the pandemic so much it will actually slow those things down? Like it won't be like people are being blasted out of a cannon. It'll be more like, well, we've been conditioned, and now we have this sense of exhaustion and laziness.
Yes.
I've heard people complain that nobody wants to work anymore.
It's true.
Work has changed.
Yep.
So we think that you and I apparently are in agreement that the pandemic has had a big effect on people's energy
Absolutely.
levels. Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean,
I
I think
think
it's
you're right.
definitely, yeah, I think it's definitely, if anything, the foundation of why people are feeling more tired now. I
Yeah,
think that, excuse me, they've adapted to this way where this is what's being done within this time frame, and this is what I can do at max. I've been maximized. This is it. So there's a sense of burnout too, where it's like everything's so mundane, everything's is exactly the same every single day. Now that we've broken back into, we can function, we can socialize, we're out and we're living our best
we're
life.
still dealing with that stuff.
Yes, we're still
Yeah,
tired. And I think, and like we're saying with work, there are some people that don't want to work. Like they don't, it was the opposite for them. It was a way for them to skate by, or like they didn't want to push forward. So now they actually have to work again. It's like,
it's an effort.
too
It's an
much work.
effort instead of a joy.
Literally.
Like
Yeah.
all of the conclusions that we should have come to during the pandemic when we were confined, it seems like we might have come to the opposite conclusions as a whole, not as individuals, right?
Yeah.
So we should have come to the conclusion that we need to build up our health so we're not vulnerable. We should
1,000%.
have come to the conclusion that more exercise is better. We should have come to the conclusion that work is a very good thing and look forward
Mhm.
to it and
Oh,
doing, and
yeah.
maybe doing more of it. I feel like
Absolutely.
we've come to opposite conclusions. But I do want to get it, that's a very kind of a timely topic to talk
Oh,
about.
yeah. We should talk about that though, because
Well,
I
we
think,
are. I don't want to talk about that
important
exclusively. I don't want to talk about
next
that
time.
exclusively, right?
Next time.
Yeah, I mean, and that's besides the likelihood that contracting COVID affected us. It affected us metabolically. It affected us in various ways. It stressed our bodies, um, and possibly the vaccine also
Could.
was a stressor on our bodies that could also increase
Absolutely.
our being tired. But let's move on a little bit, and I'm going to tell you why. Because there are so many reasons that
Oh, yeah.
people can find themselves exhausted. I mean, I just took like 10 seconds and I wrote out a short list, and I know there's a lot more.
And you probably
Seasonal.
have more that you want to write down.
Oh, I could go
Yeah.
on, but seasonal. People have heard of seasonal affective disorder. Obviously, the days are shorter, there's less light. That in of itself can
Absolutely.
be huge. As it is, we have issues with light in our society. We can
Hmm.
get into
We
that
don't
as
get
well.
enough.
Iron deficiency and anemia,
Hmm.
blood sugar issues, sleeping problems, poor diet, hormone issues, toxicity,
Hmm.
depletion, meaning not have enough nutrients,
Nutrients.
um, stress, which is obviously a general thing, but like that piles on, right? That can cause exhaustion, uh, and failure.
Most,
Failure causes exhaustion. Let's start with that, only because it might be the most surprising one. Have you ever noticed, Jackie, that when you succeed at something, when you set out to do something and you accomplish it, it's energizing?
yes. That's exactly the word I was thinking.
Yes. And then on the other hand, if you don't succeed for whatever reason, what happens?
I feel suppressed. I feel like, ugh, I feel as if not so much at fail, but if I didn't reach that target or that goal, it's a downer. It's
Yeah.
downer. I feel like my shoulders feel heavy. I feel
Right.
all of a sudden unorganized, or I feel like there's no sense of organization for me to get it done. So then all of a sudden, little things, everything seems to seem out of order.
Like everything goes to shit.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. So,
Exactly. Not
Jackie,
sure.
I know you go to a lot of ball games. You're an NFL person. You're always at the stadium. No, but if you ever have gone to a game
I have.
and the team loses a tough game,
Hmm.
and I've seen some brutal games. I
Oh,
saw
yeah.
the Giants in a playoff game years ago against Minnesota, and the Giants were up by a ton, and then they lost. But when people leave the stadium, there's not a word. Shoulders are slumped.
Huh.
People are
Hard shoulder.
dragging up just to get to their
Mhm.
cars. It is unbelievable the effect that
Yep.
a loss can have on
Oh,
people.
yeah.
It's like, I mean, I assume it's a mental emotional thing, but it
Absolutely.
feels almost physiological.
It's an aura. It really does. It surrounds everybody in some way, but it's just heavy. It's a heavy feeling. And I mean, what do you think? It's natural to be like, all right, you know what? You just feel down, and when you feel down, you don't have the
You
energy to
don't
want to push
have the
forward.
oomph. You don't
Yeah,
have the
you
the
don't.
oomph. You don't have that je ne sais quoi. You don't have that panache and élan anymore, and any other French word that you want to think of.
That sounds
So
nice.
yeah. So the thing about that is that nobody wins every game. Like we don't win every day. We
No,
make bad decisions, and it's a relatively common thing if you're out there trying at anything that you're going to have bad days. You're going to suffer from
absolutely,
losses.
absolutely.
So it's really important that with the losses that you don't give them too much energy and too much significance. But when you win, when you have even small wins, that you celebrate those.
Absolutely.
Because we say this all the time: you can only build on those wins. You cannot build on losses because they're so exciting.
So my daughter's swim coach actually says stack good days on good days. And it's
Mm.
really, if you really stop and think about it, it is a tremendous quote for anybody to really
I
take
love
in.
it. Yeah, that's a good coach. Well, he's a
He,
coach with a good saying.
yeah, right. But it's like the first time I heard, it, I'm like, oh, that's nice, and not thinking, like processing it. It applies to so many things. I
Right.
mean, for a child, for an adult, for someone going through a tough time, you stack the good on the good. You really have to peel away the layers. There's always good. You have to build on that. You have to build on that. Projecting that forward is going to help you push through those tough times. And again, these exhausting times are okay. It's part of life. It's our roller coaster, right?
That's right. Yeah, it wouldn't be fun. Like life wouldn't be fun if it was all a series of wins and if there'd be no drama. We love drama.
Oh, please.
So it's kind of baked into the cake that there's going to be losses, there's going to be hardship, there's going to be drama. But
Absolutely.
we have to be aware of the effect that that has on us. And that goes hand in hand with stress. Um, yes, you
You
have a
know, so it's so funny the effect that it has. Like if you've ever experienced a tough loss, a death of a family member, a close friend.
Mhm.
Sometimes it hits you in a way where it's so heavy, where you could cry till you can't cry anymore, or you mentally, it's like your body stops. You fall asleep. You wake up feeling that same empty feeling. It's a weight on you that you have to be able to push through. But it does connect.
There's no doubt about it, and even the language speaks to it, right? Having a heavy heart.
Yes.
A heavy heart doesn't create energy.
No.
We want to be light. We want to, right? When you're excited, you're light. You
Yeah.
rise, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there's all this language, whether it's being heavy, being low, being down, as opposed to being light and being up. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's ultimately where we want to be. No one is there forever.
Hmm.
But the thing is that even though losses are guaranteed, you mentioned losing a family member.
Yeah.
I hope and pray that everyone that's out there, I hope and pray everyone loses a lot of loved ones.
Because they've had that much love.
Yeah, the saddest thing in the world would be for someone to never lose anyone they love because that means A, that they don't have a lot of loved ones,
They've never had love. Yeah.
and B, they're dying young
Yes.
because it is baked into the cake. As much as we resist it, that's the
It,
game.
that's such a deep conversation though, and it's funny
Oh,
because
on my part. Hey,
there you go, get a little pat on the back. But it's unfortunately, and I say this unfortunately, as a child, I've experienced death on many levels of my life, and even quite a few, Dr. R, since I've been with you, working with you, and that
I
really
do want to qualify, not as a result of me.
no, not at all.
Okay,
No, no, no.
good. We're not making any accusations of
No, no, not
homicidal
at all.
behavior.
Innocent.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, but I feel like even when I was younger, my first experience with death that I remember was my grandmother. And I was like, I was devastated and I felt so cheated because I was young. I should have my grandma till I'm old. And unfortunately she was sick, but then so on and so forth. Like as people passed in my life, there were different stages of my life. And I've always embraced them in different ways. And I do know people that have not lost anyone yet, and or recently have for the first time as older adults, and they almost don't have the same coping skills. It sounds very crazy because I would give anything for my grandmother to still be here to be with my children. She would absolutely, I'm sure she does from up above, love them. But to be with them, oh, she'd be that one rolling on the floor with them and playing with. She would love it. Same thing for my husband's grandparents. But and they didn't have that experience. And then I have some people that still have that experience and have no idea.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that experience, Jackie, and then I think we have to move on because this could easily be a whole day, right?
We're building, we're stacking.
Yeah, and we want to talk about some other things, but the interesting thing about that experience is this: is that once that idea of vulnerability is pierced in us, once we experience the loss of a loved one, then death becomes a reality to us.
Yes.
And that in and of itself changes something forever, even in a small way. And depending on how hard it hits us, some people are devastated. Some people never recover from a loss like that.
Yeah.
I have a theory about that. I'll just share it now quickly. And again, it's a deep thing, but the theory is this: at some level, I think when we connect very deeply with family or friends or spouses or what have you, there's an understanding that they're now a part of us. Thus, if they're gone, it's like removing an organ, and we're not going to survive without them.
It's fun. We should definitely touch on this again because I feel like especially people on their health journey, this does affect their path.
Let's have a thing about grief. Okay, we'll move on now.
Let's do that because I'd like to talk about this. I could speak to this personally as well, so I think we should definitely discuss this.
Fine, done. Well, you're the one who schedules things. I just show up. You know my policy.
I just got to tell you when.
That's it.
And that is accurate to a T.
Yeah. All right. Now, let's just take up some other causes, right? And we'll get more into the physiological. The physiology is right how the body works, etc. Just the other day, I had a conversation with a client, and she was telling me that she had her blood work done, and she's anemic. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing, and I've been there too, right? Mm-hmm. I am there actually. Mm-hmm. I don't talk about myself too much, but so here's the thing, and this is why we need people who are not ourselves to tell ourselves things. Mm-hmm. Because she's been living like this and she understands that she's anemic, but it was like, I'm anemic, right? Like, I'm anemic. She said what she is. And I'll get around to it. It was kind of her, and I'm like, no, you're anemic. Mm-hmm. You don't have enough blood. You don't have enough oxygen going to your brain. Correct. You need to handle this.
Yep.
Right? And I made her promise me that she was going to contact. I need to follow up with her, right? She needed me to say that, just like I needed someone to say that to me.
No one thinks it's a big deal.
Yes,
No, I was diagnosed. As being anemic, and I'm saying diagnosed because it's a diagnosis. It's something that has to be resolved. When I was pregnant with my daughter, it was under control postpartum. Everything's fine. I was fine with my son, and I was fine since then. But it was only with my daughter. And let me tell you, I was shocked to know that I was. But I think it's because mentally I was strong enough, and I was taking care of myself, and I would push through.
Right. Yes.
Not a big deal.
That's the problem. Yes, we think we're invulnerable, and maybe our spirits are, but our bodies are certainly not. They're machines.
Nope.
They need blood to run. Let's just briefly talk about what anemia is.
Yes, please.
Okay. So the function of the blood is to carry oxygen to all of our tissues. Mm-hmm. If your tissues need oxygen to work correctly, including and especially the brain, right? Our brain needs a lot of oxygen. Mm-hmm. Anemia is a condition where we don't have enough oxygen. And that could happen in many different ways, right?
Oh
There
yeah.
could be a loss of blood. It could be the blood cells themselves. They're not carrying enough,
Yep.
right? Typically, we hear about iron deficiency anemia.
Yep.
Right. One thing, there's a couple of things people need to know about that. Number one, iron is the number one mineral deficiency that there is in the world.
Correct.
And it's over 1 billion people are considered iron deficient.
Yep.
Number two, anemia is what they call it at a late stage when you don't have iron.
Right.
Right? It's a late stage because what happens is the iron is in the blood, it's traveling around, but there's also a storage of it. And that's a number, and they call that ferritin, right?
Yes.
So anemia is diagnosed when the storage part is exhausted because you need to go into your reserves. This is the problem with anemia. It's common. It might be more common than they think because it depends on the parameters that are used. Even when it's not anemia, iron deficiency is common. It causes exhaustion. It could cause loss of hair, obviously loss of energy. It can cause palpitations in your heart, arrhythmias when it's not beating right. I mean, there's all kinds of things it can cause. Right. It's miserable. And sometimes it's not as easy to address as you would think.
No.
For a variety of reasons. So here's the deal. It's a good idea for everyone to get what they call a CBC, right? A complete blood count, and it gives you these numbers, and then you could at least know and work with a professional. But you might want to go to a holistic person who will look for the markers before it becomes full-on anemia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Anything you want to say about iron deficiency or anemia? Because you're aware of this. You're familiar.
Yes, I mean, I think that's when I start to learn about mineral deficiencies in general. Because I've heard of so many. I mean, at that point, I think every time someone said, "Oh, how was it?" and I turned around and said, "Oh, I'm now anemic." 1 second, okay. I'm anemic. My gynecologist got back to me with my blood work, and now that I'm pregnant with Isabella, I'm anemic. It's like, oh, it's not a big deal. You should have to take iron. Yeah.
Which is not always the case.
And that wasn't it. No. So I actually had to have prescription mineral supplements that I would take. Mm-hmm. But some of them were too high of a dosage for me for other things, which caused a couple of other things that were all resolved and I got a handle on it. But there's such a trickle down effect of being mineral deficient in general. If you're not seeking the right help and taking all of those precautions, you can miss it. And you're just dealing and coping, assuming that this is normal. And well, you have to break. That's something.
Yes, and if I could, and let me just say this about it, right? The reason it's not as simple as people think, right? We're always given these simple answers, right? If you're iron deficiency, well, you take iron, right? But in order for iron to be absorbed, you need certain conditions that are present. There is a chemical which will stop the absorption of iron.
Yep.
It's called hepcidin. Yep. If it's present in a high amount, then you're not going to have it absorbed. There are other conditions, especially autoimmune conditions, which will, not allow you to absorb iron. That's why it's a very good idea to work with a professional. Mm-hmm. But step number one is to find out, and a CBC is what will do that. So let's move on from iron.
Let's do it.
Okay. What would be another big reason for exhaustion? What comes to your mind?
Food, processed food.
Okay. So let's talk about that. What do you mean when you say processed food, and why would that cause exhaustion?
When I tell you, so I like clockwork. Okay. So I'm being completely transparent here. I am on program. I'm on day 30 something ish.
You're killing it. You're killing it.
I feel great. 30 something ish. And we Dr. R, we had our lunch the other day. Everything was great, delicious, didn't affect me, felt great. Like 2 days later, I'm out with friends on Friday night, and I had a drink, and I specifically asked for a skinny version on intentionally, and I don't think it was. And the sugar, let me tell you, hit me on Friday. I woke up on Saturday. It was one drink. Weight was fine, everything was fine, but my body was telling me something was not.
Mm.
I was full, like when I tell you my back, I couldn't lift, I'm sorry, my neck, I would lift my neck back, that my lower back was going forward. I was locked in such a weird way. And I said, this is so strange. And I'm like, I have been so clean on point. It's got to be the food. It's got to be the sugar. Sure enough, I headed over to my chiropractor Saturday morning. He adjusted me and he goes, it's a very deep concept, but it's absolutely accurate when it comes to certain foods that will trigger your weak spots, which have always been my neck. So this has happened to me previously when I decided to start program. Aches and pains, having fried foods, eating out, processed oils, hidden sugars, fake sugars. I feel it in my body. And honestly, it slows me down. And what happens when you slow down? You embrace it. Not everyone can, sometimes you can't push through being slow. You just can't do more. You just can't. And that's what we're
Yes, right. And the funny thing is, like, when you're young, you can, and then you think when you're older that you can, but really, no. It's very hard to push past the machine. We're all strong-willed in various ways, but it's very hard to push past a machine that's just not working right.
and it's not mental at that point.
Yeah, and it becomes mental though,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
let's discuss this a little bit, right? You're talking about the effects of food on the body,
Oh, yeah.
one of which will filter down into being exhausted.
Absolutely.
Especially, you mentioned sugars. You could talk about alcohol. You could talk about carbs, and there's a few mechanisms whereby this happens, but the main one is our insulin system. Right? When we have sugars, when we have carbs, the insulin raises, we get a quick burst, right? But then our bodies become resistant to that insulin.
Yes.
And then sugar gets stored as fat often, it backs up into our blood. Like, there's a whole series of things that could happen. But what you find is you get that a burst of energy and then you go low. And then you get inflammation. That inflammation, if you have, like you said, a weakness, if you have like a history of joint issues, some kind of arthritis or whatever, it goes to that area, it increases that inflammation, it makes it stiff, it could be very painful.
Yes.
There's just a whole series of events that happen. And in a way, when you do feel it, it's a blessing because when you don't feel it, you're going to keep doing it.
Exactly. And I have to tell you, and listen, and before starting program this time around, I knew I'm not doing the right things. It's summer and it's a free for all. And I'm like, okay. I was not practicing what I would preach. My 80-20 rule became like a 60-40. And instead of it being, okay, the weekends were a gathering and doing what, it became a Wednesday to Sunday. And it was like a stretch, or it was a little here, a little there. And it was very much out of my routine. And you know how I like the structure? I need the structure. I say this all the time. I probably say it 100 times a day. But I need some sort of plan. I thrive when I have a plan. I thrive. I prefer a checklist. It just gives me a goal and it helps. I'm okay with branching out, but I need a structure. And then when before I jumped in, I should say, I came to a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to start. I don't even remember what day I started. I think it was Labor Day weekend, give or take, or maybe before. And I said to myself, it was like the weekend before. And let me tell you, I woke up that weekend and we had quite a few plans. And I was like, I don't even think I could wait anymore. Like, I felt so heavy. And it was all of the signs. It was mental. It was, I didn't like my outfit that I had planned for that weekend, for 2 events that weekend. I felt like my skin didn't look great. Now in the summer, everyone's skin looks great. You have a fresh glow. I'm like, what is happening? I'm like, it was all of a sudden, everything was just so relevant. And I was like, oh, I'm feeling achy. And the jokes would start, well, you're pushing 40. I'm like, I get it. This is not that kind of ache. And even my stomach not feeling great. Like, I just felt like bloated and everything. And it was 1,000% the food.
Absolutely. And Jackie, we've talked about this before, and this is a hard thing. This is a place to get to, but I want everyone to get to the place where they're not motivated by the fire.
Correct. Don't we?
where we're not waiting for it to be a fire. And unfortunately, decades of conditioning have ensured that that's when we take action, most of
Mm-hmm.
us, and it shouldn't be that way.
It's true.
We should be motivated by what's possible, by
Mm-hmm.
performance, by living our best lives,
Oh,
by
absolutely.
what it is we want to accomplish, right?
Right.
So yes, we're talking about food and hormones are intimately related, and both of those things ultimately do cause exhaustion. By the way, have you ever noticed, and I know you have because you just kind of touched on it, but have you ever noticed the relationship between those things, so food, hormones, and energy and mood?
Absolutely.
What happens to your mood when your energy systems are down? Like you don't have the
I'm
juice.
irritable. I'm irritable. I definitely am short. Um, and honestly, there came a point where, for women especially, cycles, depending on that time of the month, at certain points where I would dip, where I'd either be very short or my mood would change, where I'd catch myself like sounding just there's a tone, and I just would not project positivity whatsoever. And I feel like overall I am more positive than not. um I definitely I am a talker, we all know this, and if anybody hasn't noticed this at this point, it doesn't take much for me to enjoy good conversation with good people. And I sometimes I don't even communicate. I'm like, uh-huh, yeah, like it's almost like my brain does not function. I can't get the
Well,
words out,
yeah, I mean that happens, and
or yeah.
what's also true is that if we don't have the energy,
Yeah.
then we have to force ourselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes the only way to create energy is to be a little PO'd, right?
Yeah.
It's not a good source of energy. It's
No.
not pure, but it works.
No, and then because then it's out.
Create something.
Like
Yeah,
you get it out. Yeah.
yeah. If you get pissed off, and then you can get your adrenaline going, right? And adrenaline is, of course, another hormone that is very often out of whack with people.
Hmm.
And then that's what we have left. That's where we
Yeah.
come from.
Yeah.
That's why people shouldn't drink and go on Twitter. But
Definitely not. Don't do it.
okay, good. Other sources that we should hit on, and we're probably going to have to do a part 2 and 3 and 17 on
I
this.
wouldn't mind a part two on this because I
Right?
think we could definitely recap.
We're hitting some really big things and things I want people to know about. Sleep problems. Just briefly, let's talk about sleep problems because we're going to have to get going.
Hmm.
Um, so many people aren't sleeping enough. They're not sleeping correctly. They're not waking up energized.
Nope.
Uh, and so, Jackie, I mean, I say this and you're like jumping out of your chair.
I am. I know.
What are your thoughts?
Sleep again, probably going to be another topic because we've spoken about sleep so many times that I don't think anybody takes it uh, to the level that we do. I mean, obviously, we know our body needs rest, our mind needs rest. You need it for so many reasons. Obviously, on program, it also helps us with fat burning. I mean, it just sleep. It does everything and anything for our machine, our vessel to work and function. If we don't give it proper rest, it defeats the purpose.
Hmm.
You're kind of just you're hitting the gas and going nowhere. So it's a matter of time, the quantity, and the quality. But all of the other things we're discussing are also contributing factors to why none of those things are working. So if you're not changing your habits, if you're not um, enforcing a structured time of going to sleep, if you are not eating properly before bed or throughout the day, it could disrupt your sleep. If you are if you're not staying consistent with those sleep patterns, all of those things are defeating the purpose. You're not going to be well rested. Therefore, you're not energizing properly. You're not
Yeah,
recharging.
sleep is another tough one, and it shouldn't be because it's so fundamental.
It's simple.
The biggest problem with sleep, I'm going to make this statement. I don't know if it's the biggest problem, but I think it might be the biggest problem. We have touched on this. There's so much artificial light that we're exposed to.
Hmm.
The way our bodies are designed is
Right
that
now.
it takes cues. Right. I mean, I'm like this close away from the screen right now.
Mm-hmm.
So the way we're designed is that we take cues from the light, and there is a cycle, right?
Right.
And this is the cycle of the sunrise and the sunset.
Mm-hmm.
But with each changing of the light, it's supposed to give our bodies cues, and certain hormones are supposed to be released.
Yes.
Little known fact for those who have trouble sleeping and will take things like melatonin. Melatonin is created, it starts to be produced with first morning light. And that doesn't mean when you fall out of bed and go to the bathroom and turn on the light. That means when the sun rises and you actually get it not through the windows,
Mm-hmm.
but
Outside.
it's actually touching you, right? There's an area, so it goes through your eyes, it goes through an area of the brain, it sets off that, cycle of
Really
starting to
cool.
create that melatonin that's then released in the evening and allows you to get to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So this light thing, and there are people who are promoting this. There's a doctor named Jack Cruz. He seems to be the biggest name in this. I would not necessarily advise listening to him because he speaks in a very scientific manner, and he's pretty arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
But he is one of the biggest promoters of this. Is that we are light poisoned. We live in a light toxic society where we're always getting bad light and we're not getting good light and we're getting
Oh,
wrong
okay.
cues. We're going to sleep, looking at our phones
Guilty.
and our tablets and what have you, and it's constant wrong cues. So this is something for people to take a look at. One of the best things you could do is get that first morning light. If you're up before the sunrise, then and you can get outside or open a window, get that first morning light. It's something nobody wants to do, but will likely have a good positive effect.
Hmm. It's funny. So speaking of this, and we say it, but I don't. We say it, but don't hear it. There's actually a new update on the cell phones. Like, so I have an iPhone, and
Yeah,
the newest update, it'll tell you if the screen is too close to your face,
interesting.
which I think is kind of, well, there's a lot of, I have a lot of opinions on that in general, but I think there's something to be said about one, how dependent we are on cell phone use and artificial lights in general, our iPads, TVs, to go to sleep. Instead of us following the cues of it's now 10:30, I'm showered, kids are sleeping, everything's ready for the next day, we should be winding down, not winding up. And there's
And that artificial light will wind us up at some level, even though we use it to go to sleep. It will wind us up because what it's telling us is it's daytime.
yes,
But listen, I want to stop here.
okay,
I do want to pick this up next week. Let's
you got it.
talk about next week, unless we have a guest, and everyone's loving our guests. I mean,
Yes.
Emily was phenomenal, and Joe and Pat. I mean, everyone's loving that. So we might have a guest next week. But
And then
let's
if
talk
not, we
about,
will pick up part two.
yeah, I want to talk about artificial light. I want to talk about radiation. I want to talk about the
Mhm.
effects that it has on the body. I think this is a good topic, and maybe more about exhaustion because there are more reasons. But just in summary, some of the biggest ones that we're discussing right now is we started out with what may be an unusual one, right? Failing.
Failing.
Failing is something, and taking losses is something that can cause exhaustion. It's something that
Hmm.
causes us to droop and to not want to strive as much anymore. We talked about anemia and iron deficiency, which is more common than people know,
Hmm.
which happens before full blown anemia.
Yep.
We touched on food and food's relation to hormones, and we touched on sleep and sleep's relationship to hormones and natural light. So we did cover an awful lot of ground.
Yeah,
I
we
would
did.
encourage people to look into it more. If you have any questions, ask us. There are some resources that we can get to you. Uh,
Absolutely.
but for now, I'm thinking, the 11-year-old kid in me is saying, but for.
But for? Why'd you
Really?
say but?
I said
You
but
said
for.
but.
No. The question is, what's a but for?
What's a but for? I
Yeah.
know.
So I think this is a good time to end off. We'll see everyone next.
Have a good week, guys.
Bye.
Bye.